I'm going to pray real quick, and then we'll sit down. We'll have a conversation. This is a conversation. If you guys have questions, we want to answer those questions. So have our panels answer the questions. Oh, someone's ready. They got ready with questions down there. But let me pray, and then I'll have Amanda introduce. We'll have everybody introduce themselves on the panel, and then we'll get started. So let me pray. Father, we just thank you this evening, Lord, for this opportunity that we have. I thank you for just the willingness for these parents to come and be willing to share, and just to share from their experience, and to help give us some encouragement on parenting from their perspective. Father, no one has parenting figured out. We're all learning. It's an ongoing, continual learning experience, as we talked about. I just pray, Lord, that you would use this time, use this moment here that we have to bring encouragement to others, to help others who are maybe battling in some parenting stuff, that they can find some things that they can apply to their style. And Father, above all else, we want to glorify your name in all that we do. We thank you so much for your son. In his name we pray. Amen.
Just one correction, though. If you have a question in the audience, we have to have you say it in the mic because we are being recorded. So you'll have to come up front and borrow a mic. So just to let you know, I didn't give him that info before he got up here. That's all right. All right, so we will go ahead and start out the parenting panel by meeting each one of our parents here. We'll start down with Julie. Julie, if you'll just introduce who you are, and then I guess together how many kids you guys have, their ages, and then I think there was one other thing I wanted you to mention. 1 second. It was, oh yes, did you grow up churched, unchurched, one parent or two parents in the home? And what age did you become parents? It's a lot, but I think you can get it.
Okay, I'm Julie Smith. This is Anthony. I'll let him answer all the young questions. We have 3 girls. Our oldest is 25, 21, and 18. Nesters. I was 22, first one. And I grew up in a household of 2 parents. And yes. Did I forget anything?
No, that was it. Thanks.
Well, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I grew up with 2 parents as well, and I was slightly, well, I won't say how old I was when we got married.
I'm never up here. Okay. My name's Brian Cooper, my wife Brenda. We have 3 that are almost 30. We're getting ready to go through the birthday cycle, so it's almost 30, almost 28, and almost 26. All 3 of them are married as of 10 days ago, the last one. I grew up in a 2-parent family, Christian family.
I grew up in a 2-parent home as well. Went to church. My grandparents were at church. My aunts and uncles were at my church, and so big family thing. Was there anything else?
No, I think that was it. Yeah, because he answered how many kids you have. So I will just say real quick the significance of letting people know what your background is. That's why we're just offering if we were church, unchurched, and what kind of a home we grew up in, so that we can understand a little bit more about your parenting styles. That's the only reason that the question is being answered.
My name is Trey Green. This is my wife, Kristen. We have 2 biological children. Piper is going to be 6. Gabe is 4. And then we have a foster daughter who just turned 2 last month. We became parents 25. 25 years old. I grew up in a 2-parent household. Went to church on and off, never every week. Sometimes with my mom, sometimes with my grandparents, but it wasn't all the time every week. So.
I also grew up in a 2-parent home, but I grew up church from the get-go. My family was at church every Sunday, unless we were sick or on a trip. So I was definitely a little different in that regard.
There you go. Now you're on.
Okay. Hello. I'm Kathy Brady. This is Mike, who is actually at work tonight. Grew up in a church home, 2 parents. We have 6 kids. Can't ask me ages. Okay, they were born at 82, 84, 86, 87, and 89, so you do the math. And 99, didn't I say that? Oh, sorry, forgot one. Okay.
Thanks, audience member.
Can you rewind and erase it? Let's start over. I've just got fired off the piano.
No.
There's
How many grandkids?
17. There's 30 of us altogether. There's
Wow.
17.
Wow. Me?
Yeah.
My name is Danny, and I grew up in a 2-parent home. Obviously, I mentioned a little bit that my parents had separated for a little bit, so I spent a lot of times with a lot of aunts and uncles. And I became a parent when I was I 21? 21. I'll be 39 and free. I always say that. So 21.
And you grew up unchurched home.
Unchurched. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I grew up in an unchurched home. Religion was Hinduism.
My name is Amanda. I grew up in a churched home, 2 parents, and we have 1 son, Nate. And I became a parent at 20.
I think so.
Okay, seems so long ago. All right. So we'll start with the Coopers this time. On Sunday, we talked about influencers and how influencers are huge in children's lives, whether it be from a parental standpoint or non-parental standpoint. So in your life, who do you feel like was a biggest influencer for you or for either one of you? Any point you want to choose. So childhood, is what we're targeting. So in your childhood, who do you feel like would have been your biggest influencer? I'm just going to take a guess. Most of it might be mom and dad, and that's okay, or that might not be, but just for your perspective.
When I was a kid, probably my grandfather, because he was very active and probably not the best example, but he was very active and always was there to help.
And not very good example as in like emotionally or?
No, Grandma and Grandpa had habits that my mom and dad probably would not, my mom and dad did not appreciate.
Yeah,
So
got it.
I'll just put it that way.
Got it. Thanks. If you don't have one, that's okay.
Yeah.
You could say pass.
I mean, other than parents, I can't remember. I mean, when I read this question, that's why I clarified what point in life. Because right now, I think my greatest influencers are probably my kids, having raised my kids, and just the perspectives that they give me, especially as they've matured and become adults, and the conversations you have, then you really start thinking, okay, well, why do I think that? You
Yeah.
know, what, so.
Thank you for sharing that. Julie and Anthony?
Well, in childhood, I'd have to say it's my mom. But as I'm sitting here thinking, more when I became a parent, someone who was a big influence was Heller. She had older kids, and when I had younger kids, I saw a lot of things that she did. She said, shaped on how I did things. Barb Haller.
I think for me, I wouldn't go back completely to my childhood. It was a different time for me. But as I got a little bit older, I would say like Julie's parents did have a big influence, at least with raising children. Yeah, I'd say that would be mine.
Kathy?
Yeah.
I mean, my mom, woman of faith. My dad taught me real work ethics, bad influences too. So a lot of things that happen, so you didn't talk about it. Honestly, influence was my
Your
and
faith?
Jesus. That was kind of what
Yeah.
some of the tough stuff. My grandma.
Your grandma, yeah. Any greens?
I would say when I was a kid, obviously I think it was my parents, both good and bad. I think I've shared before, but my dad was an alcoholic back when I was younger. So seeing some of those things growing up had an influence on me. And just the way he's changed into a Christ follower now has been pretty cool to see. It's had an impact. But then I think once we have kids or once we got married, I think we kind of look up to, go a lot to her brother and sister-in-law, Corey and Sarah Smith. So.
Yeah, I would say childhood, definitely my parents. But I do agree. Once we became parents, we did really look to how my brother and his wife started raising their family, and kind of followed similarly.
Okay. Nice. Thank you. All right. So now
How
we're
about
gonna,
you?
Well, I didn't really think about this question. I would probably say my dad. My dad would be my biggest influencer. I feel like that I took a lot of those moments, those teaching moments that he had for me into my parenting style. So I would say it would be my dad. Did you want to answer it too?
Yeah, I would also say your dad because going when I became a dad, I didn't really know how to be a dad, so I had to kind of learn. And I would observe, and I would see, oh, this person did that or that person did this, and I took a lot of things that your dad did, kind of seeing how he interacted with you, and your sister, and I kind of like I want to do like that. So for me, it was always learning. I was always learning, like, oh, what maybe I want to try this or try that. So I would say I'm like a sum of a lot of things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to transition into more of like your parenting styles and what you may have learned from them or learned along the way. But first, we're going to start out just talking about 10 classic mistakes that most parents make. May not be specific to each one of you, but maybe you don't want to say. So the more authentic that we can be, the more relatable we can be to others who might be here that are going through some of those same things. So vulnerability sometimes can be encouraged through this to help others through this. Okay, so 10 classic mistakes, and I didn't get to write these classic mistakes, but what they're saying. So first classic mistake they mention is dad is not involved. 2, mom too focused on the kids. 3, both parents are too focused on the kids. 4, the step parent is doing the discipline. 5, one parent in charge. 6, fighting in front of the kids. 7, the hero parent. 8, appeasing the ex. 9, choosing biological kids over your spouse. Or 10, allowing grandparents to rule. So did you find yourself through your parenting or learning to parent any of those classic mistakes? And if so, I have a follow-up question. I know for you guys, it's, 5 years under your belt still, so it's still, you could fall under some of those, but yeah. Yes, so do you guys want to start?
Start and point out, I guess, my classic mistake.
I could, but I'll let you do that. No, I would say for me personally, I am one that, I don't remember specifically what it was, but I do like control. So I can definitely be the one parent to rule. And so I have found that that's not always the best, but that's just my personality. So
Yeah.
I have to find the right balance. But
Yes.
Probably, I think when we were talking about it, probably like the hero parent, because I like to come in and try to fix everything or try to shield the kids from everything, or I don't know how to explain it, but I think that's kind of crossing the line there, right? How to
So we
explain
talked
it, maybe?
about 2 parenting styles on Sunday about the savior parent or the snowplow parent. Which one do you feel like you would fit more into? The savior parent being your child has in pain and disappointment and you're coming in and you're saving the day, or you're removing all the obstacles before they can even hit your child?
Oh man, I don't know. I think probably the savior parent. Would you agree? I think. Because I like to think that I can come in and I can fix everything.
Yeah.
And I like to make my
Dads
kids think I
can
can
though,
come
right?
in and I can fix everything because I can. But obviously, it's not always the case, so probably.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Coopers?
Probably for me, it would be the mom too focused on kids. Brian would probably agree with that. I mean, I was I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was the one that had the time, and that was just the focus. And you start to get your whole identity in that, which is kind of the first time I discovered I never had trouble with my temper until I was home with the kids all the time because, suddenly you've got these beings out of your control. Your identity is based on something that you can't always control. So that was kind of an awakening for me as a young parent. Yeah.
If you hear the theme, Kristen and Brenda and Danny are all Enneagram 1s, which are very much loving control.
And I guess I've also been known to dumpster dive when it was my fault that a school paper ended up in the recycling bin. So nobody saw that though. But
No mistakes for Brian, okay?
he was perfect.
I'm a partial snowplow.
A partial snowplow, okay. All right, Smith.
I would say, thinking about those, I'd like to think that we don't do any of those characteristics, but the truth is, I would say probably a combination of two, which would be the one parent rule, and I'll tell you which parent in just a second. And then, but also, and maybe even the dad's not that involved, because Julie as well has been a stay-at-home mom. And so I found myself having trouble just let her handle it. Just defer to her. And early on in our parenting, we decided we don't want to be we don't want her to be the mom that says, just wait till your dad gets home. I didn't want to be seen as the disciplinarian, but then later, we started to learn, well, ultimately, sometimes that's going to have to be the case, that dad's going to have to deal out some discipline. And then I think we recovered from that. We recognized we didn't want that to be the case. But if anything, I would say still, mom is mom, and she's been the one that's been there, all the time. So when you talk to the kids, I think most of their memories about upbringing, I'm involved, I'm very involved, but most of it's mom, a talk with mom and wisdom from mom and that kind of thing.
And you have 3 girls too, so some of that may play a role.
Yeah, thankfully, yeah.
I'll just let them know.
All right, Kathy, did you relate with any of those classic parenting mistakes? Yes?
Too many.
Too many?
I kind of feel like a freak of nature.
Okay.
Because of things that happened in my childhood, I come in saying, there is no way that's happening to my kids. And so I was like the mother hen hiding them under my wing, kind of the snowplow hero, whatever you want to combination, everything. Once I healed from that, then it was just kind of tough to bounce out of that because my mom and his mom were both very controlling and our dads were kind of placid. So coming into the marriage thinking, that's what I'm supposed to do. And as I read scripture, not. So, you're just trying to have that total shift of things. And so that was a little tough. So hopefully I didn't damage my children much. But, you grow and you learn. And I often think, then we went to homeschooling and that whole community was early on in homeschooling. So there was a lot of legalism. And so here I am, this new homeschool mom of, 5 kids, and we had foster kids, and we had neighbor kids, and kids living with us that was homeschooling, and I wanted to do it all right.
Yeah.
And so that tended to, just fall into the legalism stuff too. And so coming out of that pit of stuff is tough. I would be a much better mommy, I think, now, than now that you're on this side of it and this side of healing. And breaking free of that legalistic bondage, I guess it would be. So,
Yeah, and like we mentioned on Sunday, parenting is a continual learning
Yeah, it is.
experience every single day as well. Did you also want to share your?
Yeah, I think so. I think we got to be willing to answer too as well, right?
Sure.
I would say the one that stuck out to me was fighting in front of the kid. I think what? I guess
It says kids, but go ahead.
kid. Oh, we fight in front of dogs right now, if you want to consider that. But no, I think that was one that I had to learn early on, because for me it was like I was coming out of like no structure. I was kind of like chaos. So if we get into an argument, we're hashing it now, where she was more controlled. She talks a little bit more. She has a little more patience. I was quick tempered, and so I felt like that's the one that resonated with me, like fighting in front of Nate.
Can I interject here, Danny?
Yeah.
We sent our kids a text Sunday, and I said, okay, so what are some things that you think we did okay as parents? What are some things you're glad that we did? What are some things that you wish we had done differently? These are our adult children. And one of my girls, her answer was, I wish I had seen more conflict and how to
okay.
deal with it. So when I saw this as a parenting mistake, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of opposite. She wishes she had seen us fight more and, to see how to deal with that.
Yeah.
I would actually agree with that from my perspective as a parent. I did not see that from my parents either. It was behind closed doors, and therefore I did not get a lot of witty comebacks or anything to be able to fight with. So, but no, I did not get to see a lot of that happen either, or how it played out. You're right, yes.
So the next time our daughter comes, I'm going to start a fight.
That's funny. I think for me, mine would be right now, I feel like mom too focused on the kid. Trying to change that. I mean, I wasn't always like that, but there's some things that have happened over the last couple of years where I am very focused in my kid's life, and now I'm trying to back up because he's almost 17 and he's not going to fly the nest if I'm like right
He
over
tells
him.
her she has 2 questions. She gets a 2-question limit.
I get 2 questions a day from him.
Come on, we think it's an interrogation. I'm like, what you do, bro? He's like, I don't know. I'm like,
I have a lot of things I need to fill in my head to make sure that things went okay. So my 2 questions are, hey, how did your day go? And anything you'd like to share with me? And it's always no. So, but, okay, so based on Proverbs 22:6, the verse that we referenced on Sunday, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. What are some things that you did or are currently doing with your children to train them up? So we can start with Kathy. So you're coming from the perspective of grandkids, but then also what you did in your home with your children. Do you need longer to think? That's a lot of grandkids. I can go.
well, I mean, I just always try to, especially the grandkids when they're around, always try to point them to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Kayla remembers or not, but I always would say, look at things with God eyes. So if you look at things with God eyes, you see a lot more than just circumstances or beyond. Not that I could always practice what I preached, but I tried to make, like, if there were disasters or whatever, I tried to make them fun, and inside, even if I was dying, tried to just show them faith. And I don't know if I was real successful. I mean, they all grew up well and know the Lord and love Him, but you just try to do practical things. And devotions were always really hard to get everybody squared around and set down and quiet and not going to the bathroom, not needing to drink, and all of that. So, you just try to make your life practical and interject Jesus when you can, and try not to be a hypocrite. Apologize quickly when you make mistakes. I don't know.
Yeah. I think also, too, from getting to know some of your stories from when you were raising your kids, being in their lives, I've learned that when you guys did have hardships or whatever, you always made it fun. and you always made the positive side of
Man.
things come to life.
Well,
So, and I think that's
hope they remember
encouraging.
that.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
so.
they do remember that.
Oh, Greenie.
All right, Greens?
I think one thing for us is just allowing the kids to see that we're still involved and still serving. Whether it was youth group or setting up chairs or welcoming people through the door or making sure that they just know that church is a priority. You know, sometimes Piper doesn't want to come to church. Well, you know, it's what we do on a Sunday morning. You go and you go to your class because you need to learn about Jesus too. So just making sure they know that that's a priority and allowing them to see us, or even just like bringing them along with us when we're doing stuff at the church or working with the church or just in general. I don't know, I'm sure you have other stuff to add to it.
Yes. I think we're also very intentional with explaining to our kids why we do things. So, for example, when we started the process to get licensed as foster parents, the whole reason we did that was because we felt like God told us to through various ways. And so we're definitely doing it. We view it as somewhat of a ministry, or we hope it becomes that. And so from the get-go, talking to the kids about that and why we're doing that, and they're only 5 and 3 at the time, so, you know, kind of explaining it on their level, but letting them know this is how we are the hands and feet of Jesus. Really just, I think, being transparent and not just, you know, bringing them along so that they feel invested. And because of that, I do think they have handled our placements that we've gotten very well and have adjusted well, because I think they get it, they understand. But I do agree with what Trey said too. I just think we're trying to be very intentional. Obviously, we're in the midst of this because our kids are very young, so hopefully it pays off, you know? That's the prayer. But yeah, I think our kids just know. And we try to talk about God daily. And it may not be, you know, we don't sit and do devotions or anything, you know, daily, because that's crazy at this point. But, you know, even if it's at the end of the day for bedtime where, you know, we're saying, how'd you feel God today? Or like, how'd you see God today? And again, even at their ages, they're able to articulate something, which I think is really cool. So I think it's just those little things.
And I do think it's important too that you are bringing them to church to see those things, because that does make a difference. Because there are people who you will talk to, or I talk to on a Sunday morning, where they can't get their kids to come here. They don't see the purpose in what they're doing. And I think starting from a really young age, you tend to see that the kids coming back a lot longer than maybe someone who was very sporadic. So just to be able to see the fruit of that in some families, I think that is important that you guys are doing that. Yes.
Just to say, like, we definitely have made it a family thing. It's not mom and dad go serve. I mean, we have our things. Like, my kids know I'll go to a Bible study, or he'll go do something or serve or whatever. But it definitely is, we're a family. So even with, like, things with fostering, you know, our kids are with us. We bring them to see parents and things. So that way the kids are just always involved, for sure.
Sorry, Kathy, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, sometimes you don't have to necessarily force kids to do things like that. One of the kids, it may have been Kayla, I don't know. One of the kids said, we always read our Bible before we'd go to bed, and one of the kids said, I always remember walking by your room and seeing you read your Bible. So that would speak volumes more than just forcing somebody, you know, to do something. We also had the kids do a lot of service things. You can ask them the fun things that they encountered, but they would sing places. They would do meal delivery. We would make cards for people. Just that I kind of forced, but they were really, really good at that, and it meant so much to the kids, so it kind of taught them service, and And then we had our clubs and stuff at church that they were always at. But again, you know, you don't have to necessarily worry whether you're not doing devotions or not, because they're going to see what you're doing, and that's going to hopefully be more of an influence on them than necessarily just sitting down physically doing something.
All right, moving down to some of the adult children. Things that you may have done in their childhood to train them up with them. Coopers, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, like a lot of the rest of you, we were heavily involved in church. I mean, we've been here for 28 years when this part of the building wasn't here, that part of the, so, and the kids, so we were here every Sunday. Church was not an option. It was just part of family life. I think we probably did a better job when they were younger. I mean, we bedtime, Bible stories, we've always had dinner together and prayed at meals, and maybe not as intentional as looking back as I wish we had been. We tried devotions several different times, but it's hard, especially different age range of kids. What do you do that keeps everybody, I remember several different times we started out trying to be consistent with that, but struggled with that. We did end up sending all of our kids to Christian schools, so I think we probably then used that as a crutch to maybe not be as intentional at home. And then I guess as they get, two of the kids that responded made comments, something about seeing our faith active, and so that was a positive influence in our life. So they saw that, they appreciated that. But then also, I don't think we were intentional enough maybe as they go off to college, as they leave your home, because that's real, they're in the little bubble when they're growing up with you, but then when they're out, then that's when they start exploring more of their own ideas and stuff, and or other ideas, and which may not, their beliefs may be a little different than what you had or thought you were teaching them. They have to make their own choices, and not that our kids went crazy at all, but they're not just like us. And I think I thought they maybe would be just naturally, because that's kind of what I did with my parents. I'm pretty much like my parents without them really doing anything intentional. So I wish we had had more conversations as they were in those college years, I guess. Been more intentional.
Smiths?
Yes, I get to answer this question. When the girls were little, I know I went through, I'd be guilty for not doing all the Bible study stuff, but we always made a priority for them to be here on Sunday. And as they got older, we were definitely having them make it a priority and encourage them to be involved in stuff, and especially in youth group, which I think has made a big deal. And of course, as they've gotten older and gone off to college, we ask them and talk to them about it and just encourage them more than forcing it. I think that's just kind of helpful, but definitely we didn't do all the little Bible studies. We didn't do all that kind of stuff. But I did encourage them, even as they were getting older, to do it on their own.
I would just add that, when the kids were young, we were much more intentional with, okay, it's time for bed, let's read our Bible. We did do that, but then they kind of picked that up on their own as they got a little bit older. As soon as they were able to read, really, that kind of became their own thing. But I guess I would just add that, as parents, I think one thing they saw in us was when we said something, we meant it. We meant what we said. So one example of that is, you find yourself telling your kids to do something over and over and over again, and they're not doing it. And was a church story, but our oldest, she consistently wouldn't get ready in the morning for church. And Julie told her one Sunday, if you're not ready when it's time to leave, next time you're going to go to church in your pajamas. Well, next week came around and she was goofing around, and lo and behold, we showed up at church and she was in her pajamas, and you've never seen her come to church in her pajamas again since then.
Yeah, and I think the consistent theme that we hear is that church was a priority for each one of the families, for each one of the kids. Priority was that church was happening, right, in your household. This is important. And I think, too, for us, maybe our kid is a little worse than that, but he's hard to get here on a Sunday morning. I really don't know that I can pick him up and physically bring him here. That's what I tell Danny. I'm like, I don't know how we're getting him here if he doesn't get in the car. Like, then what are the consequences? Then he's going to hate church. You go through all of these things. These are the house rules, that you go to church. And there's controversial information either way. Like, if you shove your kid into it, they're going to go away from it when they get older. But it doesn't always tend to be the norm. Like, if it is a priority in your home, the statistics are that you will return to church. May not be in your first college years or your first few years, but you will. And I remember my dad in my college years, one of the ways that he was intentional was he would call me every Sunday, and he would say, "Hey, so what was the sermon about today?" And I'm like,
Jesus.
I don't remember. But he was intentional even in my college years. I knew it was important. I knew I needed to be there, whether I was paying attention or not. And even though we were just getting those check marks in those college years, I feel like it must have paid off somehow. I mean, it's a priority. But talking about youth group, this is where I went this trail. Youth group. So youth group is one of those things where it's changed a little bit from how it used to be. Youth group used to be for the kids and fun and engaging. And we're youth group leaders. I'm not going to say anything bad about it, okay? Well, I know you've been there. And but what I will say is that if you cannot get your kid to a youth group or something that is for their age specific, you will want to try to find another group that does Bible study with your kid. So youth group at your church may not be that thing that just drives them to love Jesus, but it may be another group that is with a different church or that is with maybe a discipleship group with a group of friends that's outside of youth group that gets together. However they are getting Bible study with their peers on a weekly basis is what you're going to want to focus on. That is what youth group is for, and it is an easy avenue, and it's what we strive to do, and it works for most kids, but not every kid. And some of those kids, it will drive them the opposite direction. So all I'm saying all this to say is make sure that even if you're not doing the daily Bible studies with your kids or whatever, make sure at some point they are getting with peers, they are doing Bible study with people or kids of their age group to get that time with Jesus, to build that relationship with their peers. That's what I wanted to add for that. That doesn't just come from my expertise. There are lots of webinars and different conferences that I've gone to that do suggest that advice. So I'm just sharing that with you. We do try to make youth group a really good time, but it doesn't always fit for everyone. So if that happens to be your kid, then you will just have to work a little harder on figuring it out. All right. So training up your child. Another way that is really easy to do when your kids are young but can read is by just sticking little Post-it notes on their mirror to remind them of their identity in God. We can even do this as adults, but to put little Post-it notes on the mirror where they brush their teeth in the morning or when they wake up, maybe it's on their door or somewhere that they see or in their lunchbox. I know they say that, but you don't always get there. So like the night before, you take the time to be intentional to write them either a scripture, because they're going to read that as they're sitting there brushing their teeth, or you're going to say, "You are a child of God." And then those are the thoughts that they can be thinking about throughout the day if they get there. But a lot of times, even before they go to bed, those are the things like, why did my mom write that on my Post-it note on my mirror? Like those are the things that can get them talking with you, get them thinking a little bit, and instilling Bible verses in their hearts.
Hey, Amanda, along with that, I had a friend that had kids a little bit older than me, and one thing she told me once, she goes, "I want to teach my kids to have God esteem rather than self-esteem." you know, the big talk is teach your kids to help your kids have good self-esteem. No, we want them to have God esteem, realize who they are in Christ.
Yeah. All right. Let me see. Okay. So the question I'm going to ask next is, what is something that you intentionally do with each of your children to communicate love? So we talked a lot about relationships with each of our kids and how our kids are very different. They receive love very differently. What is something that you have found works? And maybe you have to give us like a little bit of background of your child and how they receive love, and maybe what you've done with your child to show them that love. Anyone want to go first? Anthony? You smiled the biggest.
Voluntold. Well, I mean, we joke a lot that our three girls are all complete opposites of each other. So they're all, I mean, as far as they can be apart, as far as their personalities. But so my oldest is a new engineer right out of college. And so one of the ways that her and I bond right now is we talk a lot about, I mean, I'm an engineer too, so we talk a lot about work stuff. You know, we'll talk for an hour and a half on the phone about kind of the problems she's experiencing and maybe my experience in that. So, but then she has completely different types of conversations with Julie, which is, you know, really, you know, interesting to me that we're able to bond over those types of things. But then with like my middle daughter, Natalie, she's an artist, and I can remember, not so much now because she just, you know, she's just so much better at this stuff now than we are, but we enjoyed art as well, Julie and I, and we would sit at the table for hours and just, you know, just draw and craft and those kinds of things. Julie's really big into crafting, so and that was a big thing for all of our kids, but for her, I think that really hit home. And then with Kaylee, she's different in other ways, but she's also going to school for engineering. But I think that with her, it's more about maybe doing things together. I don't know if you want to add to that, but so yeah, they all definitely have their different way of getting through to them.
And how long did it take you to figure that out? A long time, or?
No. I think that's something that, you know, as we were raising them, we realized that that's just how we have to communicate with them. Another thing, you know, that was different was with Tiffany. It might take several times to get through to her, hey, that's not the way we want you to behave or whatever, when she was little. And then she wanted to explain like why it's not okay and why, you know, or whatever. Why I can't put the cat in the box or whatever. But then with Natalie, it was the exact opposite. It was like all you had to do is just say her name, and she knew. She just wanted to please you. Mm-hmm. So you had to be real careful that you didn't really upset the apple cart too much with that. So they were all completely different in that way.
Greens?
One thing that we try to do is make sure we have one-on-one time with each of the kids. So I say at least once a month. I'll go on a daddy-daughter date, and Gabe and Mom will go on a dinner date, and then we'll have a boys' night and a girls' night. So that's one of the biggest things is just having that intentionality, just one-on-one. And then kind of like they said, there's different conversations with the different kids. So that's just really cool and enjoyable.
Yeah. Again, since our kids are young, my 4-year-old boy is like my boy, so I feel like we're just always communicating love. That doesn't require a lot of effort. But with Piper, she's very similar to me and thinks similar to me. She also wants to know why things are why I say what I say. So I do have to explain that. But again, it's like me, so that's a little easier. But with her, a lot of times at night, I'll lay with her and have really deep conversations with her, actually. I think it's half procrastination for bed, but half general curiosity. So just having, not always rushing through bedtime. I think that that's one thing we struggle with sometimes is like we do our checklist because we're ready for the kids to go to bed because, they're exhausting. But I have found the times where I take the time and I just sit with her and I talk with her. We talk about a lot. I mean, theology. Like she's very curious, so she's very inquisitive, and so it's I think just slowing down and granting that time for us too.
Well, I think with our kids, because they're all grown up, some of them like biking, some of them like kayaking, some of them like hiking, so we try to do an activity that each of them like to do. But, one-on-one time is no longer one of them. Now it's child and spouse and dog. So, so that has definitely changed.
Well, you said the activity, that now that our kids are older, if one of them asks us to do something with them, even if Brian's had a really busy week at work or whatever, and we're like, oh, we don't really, well, okay, but we're going to do it. Anytime they ask, we pretty much make it work out. So time, I think, is probably a big thing with all of them. My older two kids, I'm just trying to think more specifically. When Brianna was little, it was letting her get a pet, but
And another.
she would get a stack of library books about this tall about how to take care of that pet. And, after she researches so much, how can you say no? We had about 15 in the house at one point, but none now. No pets. Our youngest daughter's easy because she's a gift giver. Gifts are her love language, and letters and notes. I mean, so just writing her a letter, handwritten letter. I mean, but yeah. Right now, I'm trying to think with the other two, other than spending time. I mean, respecting them as adults, not. I don't know.
So even when
Sure.
they were a little younger, too, for the activities, did you find that it was easy to get those activities in to do with them, or do you not do them as much when they were little, do them more now as adults? Like,
I mean,
were you
since
just a
since I was
juggle?
home, I mean, I did a lot with the kids when they, there was a period where we were going to the zoo every week, and we'd go to parks, and we'd, a lot of things.
So intentional in the activities still.
Yeah, I was pretty intentional then. And, the kids talk about the time we spent at the cabin and building the cabin and stuff. They talk about that fondly. And then as they get to be teens, all your time is spent watching them do activities. And they all appreciated us always being there.
Yep. Thanks. And Kathy?
So when the kids were little, I was babysat. So, like we had an end of summer party. So we had I don't know, I think at one time I had 15 kids. So we'd make a big thing. We did a Noah's Ark party where everybody bought their stuffed animal and just try to focus on fun things like that. As they're adults, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the love language because that's what I was going to say is you really, I mean, you think even early on you become a student of your kids. And you have to kind of learn what speaks love to them. Obviously, my love language, I always try to push on everybody. Can I help you? Can I clean your house? Can I clean your toilet? So I love to just go
helper.
in. If you don't have a cat, I'll come to your house and do yours. But, just going and if I can fix a meal or help the kids with homework or help with homeschool or help clean the house or do laundry or clean your toilet. Whatever, we have one that's kind of words of affirmation it's the love language. And so I'm always getting texts and pictures of things that have been done. And so I'm always, which I'm truly, truly proud of that one. Another one is gift giving and try to outdo her. Her gifts are really crazy. But, I just try to do something if I pick something little up at the store, just to let them know that you're thinking of them, and just try to be there for them. And hopefully they know that no matter what, you're there. I remember, I'd be busy and the kids would be doing figure eights around my legs and whatever, and somebody'd come with something, I would just sit down right where it was. If I had to turn the stove off, I'd turn it off or whatever, and you just sit and you make that time. And I think nothing really breaks my heart more nowadays than to see, you're at the ballpark or you're somewhere, and kids are just dying for their parents' attention, trying to ask them something, and they're on a cell phone. I mean, everybody's on cell phones now. And so I think that makes it harder for parents nowadays than it did for us. But you just, I remember David used to come home from work. He worked at Bob Evans, and so he closed. And when he'd come home, we'd probably sit and talk for an hour or so. He even fell asleep laying across our counter in the stove one time. We were just sitting talking, and just things like that are just really important to stay focused on the kids, and you do your best to stretch every direction to make sure you are.
Yeah, thank you.
You have a question in the audience, you think?
What?
Does anybody in the audience have a question for the panel?
Are you guys still there?
No?
Yes. I'll repeat it if you say it loud enough. I'm gonna have to start over. So I guess for what is it?
So the parents that have already had older kids that have left the home.
Yeah.
I guess how did you balance all the life but still manage to focus on individual kids without just like running around like a chicken?
So the question is, for those of you with adult children, how did you balance the everyday of busyness in life with focusing on individual children, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
They can still have the focus of God, individual children, showing all their love languages.
Yes.
Yeah, all that stuff. And not being a stay-at-home mom.
Okay, well, I can't answer that part because I was a stay-at-home mom. But I do know one thing that we did when the girls were little and as they were getting older, we limited what they were able to do. Because nowadays you can do everything and anything there is. So we limited what they could do. It was like you did one thing and that was it. There was no overlapping a bunch of stuff. It was not over having 2 or 3 different activities. So that allowed them to be home more and just be a kid and just relax. So that was where we were able to spend some time with them. So even though it's hard, I think you have to make the hard decision and say no. Sometimes you just have to say no to things so you can be intentional about spending the time.
One thing
With
a season or one thing?
a season. It was usually a season. Yeah, it was usually a season.
I would just add that, it's more difficult than it sounds like and when she says one activity, she means like piano and then soccer, like a sport. So that's still a lot. So we would have piano lessons at least once a week, and then lots of piano practice, and then we'd have soccer like all the time. And then when you have 3 kids, it just multiplies out. So that was just, it sounds like it's a harsh limit, but it's really pretty high bar. But we do see a lot, it seems like a lot of kids now are pushed to do just so many activities. And so I would just agree that, setting that limit really helped us. Of course, with Julie staying home, that was a really big help. But just limiting those activities was probably the biggest thing for us.
That's tough because I don't know that we did that well necessarily. And our 2 younger kids, both in the text I sent them, they both said how much they appreciated us always being at their games and all that stuff. But looking back, sometimes I wonder, what was that doing to our oldest daughter, who was not interested in sports at that point, not really interested in going to the games as a family? you know, I've since thought, how much time was she sitting at home by herself while we were at the younger kids' activities, games? You know, I maybe need to ask her that sometime. But so, you know, looking back, maybe we should have said, okay, we'll go to all your home games, but your away games, I'm sorry, we can't do that because, you know, we can't do everything. I don't know. That's just a thought here, but, because that's hard. And, you know, but we went, you know, we supported her in everything she did as well. It's, you know, she just didn't choose to do sports in high school. But, I don't know.
And we had limited electronics, and so, you know, we didn't deal with a lot of the video games that, you know, people use today. And a funny story is one time our daughter, our oldest one, she would watch, you know, tapes back in the day. And I can remember one time that she went to bed, and so Brenda and I actually sat down to watch a movie, and we're watching a movie, and she comes in and she goes, "We don't have that tape." She had no idea the TV worked without, she thought it only worked with the tape. So we got busted when she was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4, so.
Can I just add a little bit to that, you know, about not being able to maybe go to all the activities. I mean, that's one thing as well. We tried to make it to as many as we could, but we never, you know, we obviously couldn't do everything. So we had to make those choices. And we talked to the kids about that. It's like you know, there's a lot of things going on, and I mean, not to mince words, but the world doesn't revolve around you. You have to learn that we're going to come to these things when we can, but we can't always, but we will when we obviously will, because we love you and we want to see this, but we're not going to, you know, if I got a piano recital to go to and a soccer practice, I'm probably going to go to the piano recital, and I'm not going to be able to be at your soccer practice or whatever that, you know, whatever that might be. So I think it's important for kids to learn that when you grow up, people aren't always going to be able to cheer on you all the time. They're going to be there as much as they can, and it's a tough lesson, but it's important.
And I think here too, this is where the war on culture comes in, where the kids are seeing how many activities their friends are in, how many activities that they feel like they need to be in. As they were talking, I remember when I was sitting in one of the conferences, there was an idea which didn't apply to us at the time, but maybe I can share, and this applies to you, but that, like Anthony and Julie were saying, to limit the activities, because the idea was to sit down with your family, whether it be monthly or seasonally or annually, and set some goals for your family. And that could be that you're able to choose one sport or one activity that is important to you, but it's also important to our family that we're spending time together. So you're also able to schedule in family time, like your individual time, but then that also went into parents dating too, like that you would have time as a spouse together. So if everyone in your family knew the goals of your family and why you were doing what you were doing, instead of just saying, no, you're not doing that sport or you're not doing that activity, then everyone's on the same page. And two, it also challenged some of the other kids, like, what do you mean your parents want to hang out with you? Like, so they're you know, it's different. It's a different culture that they're in. So I think that it can speak volumes too. Just depends on what, I mean, like we never used that, but it was an example that made me think of that, and maybe it would work for your family or something. So.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit, one of the things that we always did was try to count the costs. Like a lot of times, because you got to count the cost. There's a cost to everything that you do, whether it's at work or whether it's like, you know, going to the kids' games, so always try to figure out what is that cost, and we always try to make goals at the beginning of the year, and we always see how those costs align to those goals. Does it hurt those goals? Does it help those goals? So there's always a cost to the things that you do. Everything that you do, there's a cost. It's whether or not you're willing to pay that cost. And we talked about on Sunday, like relationship is the biggest one. So it's always hard to think about that, but always try to think of the cost of what you're doing.
And when you're doing those activities, you've got a lot of time in the car sometimes too. Maybe be intentional about conversations you're having, you know, time you're spending when you may be tired and not feel like it, but I don't know.
That's where my interrogation usually started, right when I picked him up from school on the way home. Because then once you get home, I know, I mean, he goes in his room. When do you see him? I can't get him out of there. So, but I will just mention too, another way to communicate love to your kids is by doing something that they know that you don't like to do with them. So for
No,
me,
you don't like to do, not
for
with them.
me, that was, that I don't know, learning to play video games with Nate. I like video games. I don't like the video games that he plays. So here I am, and I'm terrible. And he's frustrated with me about, like, because I'm too slow and I lost this weapon or whatever. And I'm like, but here we are. They said it was supposed to be fun.
I'm still on strike.
But, or even like, okay, there's this character, Venom. I don't know, you might have heard of him. I cannot even stand the guy's face. But to Nate, that's a big deal. So I'm like, I have to make this a big deal because it's a big deal to him. It doesn't matter what I think, but so some of those things are dying to myself. I'm like, it's a cool shirt. Has a lot of color on it. I mean, I'm not going to say I like the guy, but those are the things that are important, and those are things that I'm communicating to him that I am interested in his life, that I am trying to be involved. So, a lot of it is dying to ourselves. I think I've heard that somewhere before. Yes. We have a mic on the way.
We have a mic.
Okay, sorry. So when you went to your children's events, did you find it important to like separate and conquer or to stay together as like a couple? Like, was one way more important, do you think?
When that happened, we usually separated and conquered just because at that point, having one of us at each event was our priority. At that point, that's what we did.
Is it on? We did the same thing. If one was one way, we went the other way, especially, I think, with the way work schedule worked and me staying home, it kind of, but yeah, we divided and conquered.
All right. Was that your, okay. We went together because it was easy to go with. Just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. So the last question I'll ask, because we've been talking about being intentional with our kids and being their love language or whatever. So how are you intentional in your marriages through parenting? How do you put the other spouse first? Because our kids are not first. Our marriages are first. So how have you or did you put your marriage first above your kids? Go ahead, Kathy.
For years, we would, whenever Mike got home from work, we would sit and the kids would know that that's our time. So Mike could just tell me about his day, good, bad, or ugly. You know, the kids would always run and greet him at the car, and then they would go on about their thing. But they knew that that was our time. So we would just sit and have that time to kind of decompress. Something that, though, along with what Nicole was asking too, though, and that's backtracking, I know, but I was thinking, a lot of times I think as parents, we have to limit what we do and our activities too. That's a season you're in, and it is important to be with the kids, but you can also run your kids ragged if they're, like sometimes I think, we went to Pioneer Clubs, we went to church, we went to Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening, and they're exhausted too. So, and then, Bible studies, and I'd try to start those, and I just can't. So sometimes you just kind of have to die to self on some of those things, but I really applaud you girls that work and try to balance everything, because I couldn't do that. So that was a backtrack. That was a PS.
All right, Greens, how are you put your marriage first above your kids?
I don't know. I want to hear what these guys say, so I want to learn.
All right.
No, I mean, I think it is important to like have our alone time. With our kids being so young, I find it harder. And then we're both working from home now, so the boundaries at home is a little bit harder for them now. But just trying to take as much time as we can, whether it's at night or we used to get up in the mornings and do like coffee dates, but mornings are hard lately, so that's been few and far between lately. But no, I mean, some things, but I want to hear what these guys say so we can learn.
Perfect. Coopers?
This is an area that I did really bad in, honestly. Brenda did a real good job keeping everything going and everything, and she let me do all my little side things. So I was too busy. Looking back, I was too busy. And too busy at church, on different boards, too busy at Round Lake, too busy with the side business. So I did not put it first, so don't take my advice on that area.
Although I will say, you were always very supportive of me, though, as a mom. I mean, so I always felt supported. So in that way, like, again, I guess we weren't intentional enough maybe about spending time just alone. Although, I mean, when we were building the cabin, we spent time by ourselves because the kids were off playing with cousins. But and I would also try to be his biggest support too. Like I remember saying to the kids sometimes, now, you don't say that about my husband, putting, he's my husband first over your dad, so be respectful,
Smiths?
I just remember when Kaylee was about 6 months old, we ended up finding one of our best babysitters. We had her for 5 years. We would go out at least once a month or every other month. It wasn't necessarily a big date or anything, but there were certain things that we'd have to do, so we'd always have a babysitter. That was always something I remember doing. I know probably the first part of our marriage, when the kids were really, really little, when Tiffany and Nana were really, really little, he was also going to school. So it was a big deal for us to get that babysitter. It was important for us to actually have her come and stay with the girls so we could go just shopping sometimes. I think we did.
Good.
I want to give one example.
Sure.
Brenda had one of our kids, and I was in school at the same time, and I was literally back in class like 3 hours after the baby was born. That's how supportive she was of me. Of course, I would have to write a paper if I didn't show up for class. So.
I would say this is one area for Danny and I that we don't do well, even with one kid. But that is because every time we do have intentional time, we just end up fighting. So it's like we have this free time, and now we just end up arguing about what we're going to do, where we're going to go, all of these decisions.
We spent a lot of time working on our sermon.
So, which now we need the crisis in family next week. But those whenever we would get an intentional time away, so those are sometimes were not always good memories of us doing that. But because we have one kid, I felt like anytime someone wanted him to sleep over, it was like a free night, which sometimes it was every weekend, so we didn't always need that. So I don't have a lot of parenting advice on that because we have one kid and it kind of just naturally came, but it definitely could be challenging with multiple kids and that. And too, with fostering, like you won't know when your next date night could be, right? Yeah. So it's intentionality when you can get it. All right, so I didn't have anything else from the parenting panel questions perspective. Did you want to add anything?
I didn't have anything else to add. I know we're kind of coming up close on time and want to be respectful of everybody's time, but we'll just give each couple just one last opportunity to share any words of wisdom, parting advice that you want to share with the group that's here. Oh, we have a question? One. We have a question. Yeah.
Did you guys have parental differences, and how did you reconcile when you wanted to parent differently?
Do you want us to start?
Yeah, we can start. We can definitely start on that one.
We still don't agree.
Yeah, we still don't agree.
It is communication. And I think explaining the why behind what the thing is that you're trying to do helps. Trying not to, maybe you should just talk.
Why? Why? I think a lot of the time we defer to Amanda. Like I said, I literally learned on the go how to be a dad. Like I watched what this dad did with his kid, so then I will try doing those things. So I really had to learn how to. So I didn't know what my parenting style was. I'm still kind of. I don't want to say I'm still learning, but like I've come a long way from where I started. So a lot of times it kind of deferred to kind of Amanda because she grew up and she had like that experience. So it was easy for that. And but like one of the biggest thing that right now is an item is like I grew up having to get good grades because for me that was like I had to get good grades. For her, grades wasn't never really a thing. Like her mom and dad, not that they didn't care, but they didn't force. But that's the biggest battle we had. I'm like, he's got to have good grades, and to the point where now he's paying for it because he doesn't have good grades. Because
So we might end up an argument again. So let me just cut him off here. So what I will say is a lot of this is going to go back to you having a relationship with your child and what's going to work for that child specifically. A lot of the differences that came between us or that come between us is because that maybe in those early years and maybe still today, this is not a cut on him, but that relationship, because it was severed in the beginning and it never grew, it has a challenge in growing now. So there's not a lot of spaces where he is good in the relationship to know what is going to be best in those scenarios. So a lot of it is going to be intentionality from both of you to get that relationship with your child and to know the relationship and how your child receives love or receives discipline or receives really anything. The relationship is going to be key in parenting together. So he knows that there are a lot of things that happen early in that childhood, that in Nate's childhood, that he was blocked from, didn't want anything to do with. But not that he didn't want to on purpose, it just wasn't how he was raised.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's going to come back to your relationship.
Can I say something? So I think for Piper and Gabe, for us, we have a pretty similar parenting style for the most part. What we're kind of learning on the fly though now is with fostering, and it's a totally different ballgame. Parenting our own bio kids, and compared to say Mary. But I think the biggest thing for us that we've found is whether we disagree or agree, we're going to have each other's back in the moment. And then we're going to talk about it later. Never overruling one parent or the other, especially at our kids' age right now. We don't want them to see, well, mom's always saying this, but dad does this, or vice versa. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, our kids know we're on the same team. So, we do definitely, I don't say we wouldn't have, I think, quite as large differences as maybe you guys, but we do have differences for sure. But I think, too, we're also trying to be humble, too. Like that, and that's a huge one for me, because like I said, I'm the control freak. So I think things should be a certain way, and a lot of times I have to humble myself to say, okay, Trey can handle this better because X, Y, Z. Because sometimes he can communicate better with Piper because we tend to butt heads because we're similar. So I think at the end of the day, just always being respectful of each other because our relationship is first, but also being humble enough to be open to the other person's perspective too.
Anyone else?
We just had the disadvantage, I guess, but we had a long wait before we could have kids. And so we had a lot of communication beforehand, how we would do it. But we had some that would bat eyes at Daddy and not know that I had already said no to something or whatever. So we had to just come together and say, okay, this one's going to try to weasel something out of you, so you're going to have to be aware. So it was just mainly communicating. Not that we always did everything perfect or everything right, but a lot of communication, a lot of praying.
Anthony, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that I think Trey and Kristen, the comments were right on, that you have to be on the same page no matter what. I mean, and even if you just strongly disagree, once your spouse has said something, you really, I think it's smart to go along with it, at least in that moment, and then regroup. One thing we did talk about that a lot early in our parenting was that, you know, it's more important that we're, consistent with each other, but then B, we want our kids to grow. So we want them, we want to think before we just say, don't touch that, or whatever. We want to be really intentional about making sure that they're learning at the same time. And so sometimes we wouldn't always have the same idea about, is it a good idea for us to allow Tiffany to do this or do that when maybe it's a growth opportunity. So, but yeah, I completely agree with what they're talking about with being on the same page.
Yes, no, I definitely agree with them as well about being on the same page, because when you do come together and you make that decision, then after the fact, I can always be like, this is because you made this decision.
Yeah. Don't
But he'll
make.
never know.
I always get, don't make threats you can't keep.
Yeah.
You're just punishing us. So we punish ourselves a lot. Like, you can't watch TV. No, you can't watch TV.
Okay, so I just want to wrap up first by just saying what we started the sermon with was, we're all imperfect parents. We all have imperfect children. We're all learning. It's a continual learning process. We cannot do parenting without God right in the center of our marriages. It is going to be impossible to get through, really. So I think God is essential in your families, and just helping us each to learn every day about parenting, because none of us are ever going to be experts. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, nothing for me. But if there's there's parting words, like I said, nugget of wisdom. If you want, we can start with Anthony and work our way down.
I'll just say, the girls have been we've been talking about this, I think, the last few years, because people was asking, how do you do that? We were always making sure that what we said, we followed through. So you had to make sure you followed through. And like you said, we always made sure it's like, we got to be careful about, don't punish ourselves. What you say, you better sure you may follow through. It may be a punishment for you too, but whatever you say, follow through. Because I was like, they were fighting in the back of the van. I'm like, I'm going to stop this. And they're like, oh no, I stopped in the middle of the road. And buddy, from then on, they were like, oh, if they say that, that's, yeah. So follow through was a big thing.
And I think consistency and structure too, I think, and intentionally. I don't think we did that enough. I don't think we're intentional enough. You start raising your kids and you just kind of end up being reactive. Just react to the situations as they come and deal with them. But then when you realize that your second or third kid may not be the same as that first one, so then you have to put things in place by then, but you didn't do it for the older ones. And so, just a little thing like buying clothes. Our oldest daughter, she never really asked for much, so it was never an issue. And our son, not too much either. Our youngest daughter, she, okay, does she really need another pair of jeans? Does she really need, so, we're always have to make those decisions. So when she was like in middle school, we're like, okay, this is enough. We're just going to give each of the kids so much money. We just did it by the quarter. Okay, you get X amount of dollars each quarter. Don't ask us for any clothes. You choose how you spend that money. And that was one of the best things we did. And they'll tell you that. They loved that they were learning to manage their money. Our kids discovered Goodwill. And They, still to this day, we joke that Bridget rents her clothes because she buys them at Goodwill usually and then donates them back, or, so. But we wish we had done that maybe with more things. I wish we had maybe set milestones. Okay, at this age you start doing this. At this age you start doing this, so that it was consistent throughout. Because you always hear, well, that's not fair. You did this. You did, Anyway, Brian's got one.
Yeah, my advice, and who has the youngest daughter here? Who would that be?
Purvis is probably youngest daughter.
Okay, so here, now I want to preface this. Both of my daughters are married, so what I'm going to give you, I don't think works.
What does it say?
I think it says dads against dating.
Dads against daughters dating.
It's your size too. Look at that. How that worked out.
Well, I mean, this was, you got inflation. I think at that time we only gave them was it like $40 a quarter or something? I mean, it wasn't a ton. Of course, they had school uniforms, so they didn't have to buy clothes to wear to school. They didn't have to buy their school uniforms with that. So, yeah, so you might have to.
Nicole, we kind of did the same thing a little bit different than what we started with Tiffany, especially in middle school, and we figured out, and she got an allowance every 2 weeks. So she kind of got paid every 2 weeks. We just kind of figured out what we had spent on her the year before, gave her a little extra, and had at it. They never asked us for money at all through anything. They definitely fought Goodwill, but it was, and they'll tell you too, it was probably one of the best things that we did with them. No. It was anything they wanted to do. It was anything that they wanted to do extra. It was for their clothes. If they had to buy stuff for sports, yes.
Well, I think for people that have children our age, because we have a limited perspective here, but I think just putting forth, allowing your kids to, I don't want to say standards, but holding them accountable even at a young age to just to teach them and and I guess involve them, I guess is what I mean. It's just that I think sometimes we overlook just because they're little, or, we just put them in class or whatever. But I really think kids will surprise you at how much they pick up on. And so just encourage parents to be already intentional in this stage, because it's huge, I think. Were you going to add something now?
Sure. No, I was going to say, one thing with kids our age, I always say, well, it scares me to death raising kids in today's culture, in today's society. But then, like she said before, God put them here for a reason. So it's kind of our job to help mold them into the person that God wants them to be. And it comes with having standards when they're 3 or 4 years old, even if it's just, hey, you need to pick up this stuff off the floor before you go to bed, or you need to do X, Y, Z. But start at a young age, and a lot of times they will surprise you. So
yeah. And I think it's huge with respect, with teaching kids to learn respect little, so that way, because that was one of the things, right? So that's huge, and it's a huge opportunity to really start molding your kids this young, for sure, and recognizing that these children are God's. God gave these children to us to raise, but ultimately they're God's children. And so keeping that in perspective too.
And that's what I was going to say too. Just look at your kids as that gift from God. And parenting, and I failed in this a lot, and my kids can tell you, but I always try to look at them, rewind. As an adult, I have very few good memories of home. Not that my parents were abusive, but it was a bad situation with family. And so I wanted to make that better for my kids. And I always tried to look at things that I did then as, what are they going to look back and remember of their childhood? And I failed a lot. And I've gone back and asked for forgiveness for a lot of things. But you have to look at this in light of eternity. We are given blessings, and they're in this period of time for this moment in history. God knew the biological makeup and genetic makeup that he wanted, and you have to just keep going back to him. And they're perfect little people that are imperfect. And you got to remember that, what you say and do now affects them. They don't always have to have everything. Our kids really didn't have a lot because Mike went to school. He was working 2 and 3 jobs, and we didn't have a lot. But we had a lot here and a lot to give him that way. And so I just encourage you to always point him to Jesus. Don't worry about having to have the best of everything. I mean, the kids would have, a friend of ours was a doctor, and they had, back then it was Cinderella dresses were really expensive. And they passed their stuff down, and I said, this is great. We have old clothes. And the kids were like, what's that? And I said, well, they're new to us and old to someone else. So you make something positive, even if you're like inside, you're thinking, how can I make them not feel whatever? You just have to ask God for wisdom and things like that. And just look at them as children of God that he treasures, and just try to make things better for them and have fun. I probably scarred my kids with some of the dumb stuff I've done, but we had fun. And I hope that they always remember the fun things more than my failures.
You have anything? Any closing words? Yeah. No. I said it on Sunday, like, if you didn't take anything away from the sermon, was don't forego a long-term relationship just for short-term compliance, meaning like you're going to do what I want to do, what I say now. And I struggle with control very young, as a young dad, wanting, instead of meeting Nate where he was at, I force him to meet me where I'm at, and there's consequences for that. So always try to don't forego a long-term relationship in a bid for short-term compliance. So, well, I know we kind of went over. I want to thank our panelists. I really appreciate you guys, your willingness to come and to share and to impart some wisdom. And hopefully, for those of you guys, you got some encouragement from it, and hopefully some things to add. Yeah, thanks. Yes, you guys did great. We this could go a long time, but I know we said we're going to be respectful of your time. But let me pray for us, and then we can dismiss it. Then you're welcome to ask them questions, Keep drilling them, but let me pray. Father, we just thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord. Father, you know exactly this moment here. You know that at some point in this time, this group would come together to share something tonight that would touch their lives, that would bring encouragement, that would help someone in their parenting journey. And Father, that's what parenting is. It's a journey. It's a journey that we are all on. And we all have to go our own path. But I pray, Lord, as we heard tonight, there's many ways to do things. But Father, above all else, may we continue to train our child up and our children up in the way that they should go so that they may never depart from it. And Father, that's raising them to know you, to understand who you are in light of who they are. And Father, I just thank you so much for our panelists to come and share a little bit about their lives and about their parenting. I just ask a blessing upon them. I thank you for those who were here tonight, and I just pray a blessing upon them too, as well as they go forward in their parenting journeys. And we just thank you so much for Jesus. We thank you for his sacrifice. All that we do and say is to help glorify his name, Lord. We thank you so much. In your son's name we pray. Amen.